We're going to start with today we're going to discuss about Boston scientific defibrillators. So we will discuss about all the details about the counters, how it will count and detect, and the way it works. So this is here a first episode in a given patient, and you see here that there has been a diagnosis of ventricular fibrillation and one shock has been delivered. So if you look at the PDF, there are first the text that will summarize what had happened, then the tracing, and we will discuss about it. And at the end, you will have the plots also. And so we will have a look to all these three components. So, Interne from Bordeaux. What do you think about this tracing?
So we have an EGM with the beginning of a tachycardia.
Yes. What are the channels here?
So we have the atrial channel.
Yes, bipolar atrial channel.
Bipolar, and the right ventricular channel.
Yes, bipolar also.
And the far field.
Yes, the shock channel. Yes, this is the far field. And you see the quality of the tracing for the Boston devices. Most of the time, the quality is really good. And you have all the time 3 channels. So you can have both the bipolar and the shock channel when it's a dual or a triple chamber device. Okay. Then, which kind of device is it?
It's an ICD.
Sorry?
It's a dual chamber ICD.
No, triple chamber. You see LVP here, RVP, LVP. So there is left ventricular pacing. So it's a CRT device. Okay, it's a CRT-D. Okay, so what happens?
So we have spontaneous atrial signal, then the left ventricle and right ventricle pacing.
Yes.
Then we have the beginning of a tachycardia with spontaneous premature contraction, followed by another one.
Yes.
After 3, it's the beginning of the tachycardia in Boston programmation. After 3 cycles, fast cycles in VT zone.
Yes.
And so
this cycle is PVC because it's outside any zone of detection. Okay, it's too long to be in the VT zone, for example. Okay, this one is labeled VT. Okay, because it will correspond to the VT zone. Okay, and then these cycles are then classified as VF. You see the intervals here. Okay, so when you will analyze the tracing, the first thing that is common with most of the tracing with Boston is that there are many markers. Okay, if you compare, for example, Medtronic tracings and Boston devices, you will see that in Boston devices you have many more markers than, so it makes the interpretation of the tracing sometimes a bit more difficult. Okay, you see all these markers here, ATR, PVP, V episode, sudden, and all this. You also have a possibility of left ventricular sensing. Okay, in which company can you have this marker LVS? You know that? Biotronic and Boston. So you see that at the end there are many markers. So sometimes it's a bit a mess, a bit more difficult to interpret all these markers. Okay. PVP, for example, means that there has been diagnosis of a BVC and that there is a prolongation of the PVARP. You see. So is this a good idea to show this on the tracing? That's a question. Okay. Here, ATR is the marker for the diagnosis of atrial fibrillations. Okay, you see? So many markers. So what do you think now? There's also another point. So all the time you will see many information on the tracing, much more than for biotronic or for Medtronic devices, for example. Another thing that you see, what do you think about the tracing here, the quality of the tracing?
I think like here the quality is not good for the.
It's not bad. It's not a question of being good or bad, but it's an unfiltered channel. You see, the signal that you see has not been filtered. Okay. In Medtronic, for example, there is an additional filter. In Biotronic, it's very filtered. So you will never see this kind of tracing, you see, with all these very small and polymorphic signals. In Medtronic, for example, it will be filtered here. You understand? Okay. It's a very rich channel. It's the same for Abbott and Boston. It's not filtered. When there's going to be an analysis of the device, it will not work on this channel. It will work on the same signal, but filtered. You understand? The classification of the signals, for example, is not based on these signals. The device will work on a filtered signal. Okay? Good. So what do you think now about the tracing?
So I think there's fast cycles, ventricular fast cycles in the VF zone.
Yep. So you need to focus to interpret how will work the device and how it will detect and classify only on the purple cycles. Okay. The device will work on the information coming from the right ventricle. Okay. If it is VF, it's based on the analysis of the right ventricular cycles. Okay. You can forget everything about the left when you discuss about classification of the arrhythmia. Okay.
Okay.
So how does it work in a Boston Scientific device?
So after 3 fast cycles,
yes, you need 3 consecutive cycles. Okay. So this one is not fast. This one is fast. This one is fast. This one is fast. So now you have 3 consecutive cycles. So what is the next step?
It has to be 8 out of 10 in the VF zone, I think. It's
nope. You see here the first marker that you will see on all the tracing is going to be V episode. Okay. And as you said, it's going to be V episode anytime you will have 8 out of 10 fast cycle. Okay. So for example, here, this one is fast, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you have 8 out of 10 fast cycles. So you will have the marker V episode for which zone?
For the VF zone?
Nope.
For the
VF zone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, only 7.
So then for the VT zone?
Yes. What you need to understand, and that's the main parameter to understand in a Boston ICDs, is that a VT marker, like here, will implement the VT zone, the VT counter. But the VF also marker will also implement the VT counter. Okay? So if you consider the VT counter, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? And this signal, you have 8 out of 10 marker classified, at least VT. Okay? So the V episode, the 8 out of 10, is verified for the VT zone. You understand that?
Yes.
So on this cycle, what happens?
Then it has to last for 6 out of 10 cycles. And
so you cannot modify the 8 out of 10. Yeah. This is not something you can ask for, I don't know, 12 out of 15. It's something that you cannot reprogram. It's 8 out of 10. Okay. But what do you program, for example, before treating the episode? What is the parameter that you will program then?
The duration of the...
Yes, the duration, the initial duration for the detection, for the initial detection, okay? So And on this cycle, we'll start the duration, the initial duration for the initial detection of the VT zone. You understand? Is this clear? Yeah. On this cycle, you will start the duration for the VT zone, initial duration. But if you wait one additional cycle here, then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You now have the 8 out of 10 for the VF zone. You understand? And then on this cycle, in parallel with the duration for the VT zone, we'll start the duration for the initial detection of the VF zone. You understand?
Yes.
Say yes when you understand.
Yes.
Okay, so at this time you will start the duration. Okay, I will show you the guidelines, but it has been modified now, and you know that in the new guidelines, what is recommended is to program a duration in the VF zone of minimum 5 seconds. Okay, so that's the case here. You see here the marker V episode. You will see the V episode only for the first zone where the initial 8 out of 10 has been verified. So if it is verified for the VT zone, you will see the V episode. If it's then verified for the VF zone, you will not see a second V episode, okay, marker. So, but I know that it will start here the duration for the VT, here the duration for the VF. And you will arrive to the marker V detect. So from V episode to V detect, what you will program is not a number of cycles, but a number of seconds. It's a duration. So now it's recommended, for example, for the VF zone to program at least 5 seconds in the VF zone, okay? And during this duration, you need to verify on every cycle that at least 6 out of 10 are fast. You understand? So here, every cycle is correctly labeled as VF, and you see that this is a VF, clearly, this is a ventricular fibrillation. So on all the cycles, you will have an analysis and say, okay, at least 6 out of 10 cycles classified VF. So that's the case here. And you arrive here, finished 5 seconds, and there has been at least 6 out of 10. So you will have the marker V detect. Okay. At this time, this is the time where there's going to be the therapies. In the VF zone, you will need first to charge the capacitors. So on this cycle, V detect, then you will charge the capacitors. There is all the time a verification, cycle by cycle, that the 6 out of 10 is verified. For example, here, you see one long cycle, see, 195, and then nearly 400 milliseconds, because this cycle has not been detected. A bit of undersensing, okay? So this one is classified RVS, so it's VS. So, but on this cycle, if you have an analysis, retrospective, you see that this one is VS, but this one is VF, 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 VF. So you have at least 6 out of 10. So even if there is a bit of undersensing, that's not a problem. It will not stop the charge of the capacitor. There is one additional here undersensing here, and then one cycle classify VS also. So, but you see that it's always verified that there is at least 6 out of 10. Okay, so you will go up to the end of the charge. Always verify on the cycle, and then you arrive to the end of the charge. So what happens here?
So it confirms that there's still the 6 out of 10 cycles in the VF zone, and
so it has been verified up to the end of the charge. Then
it delivers the shock at
no, first there is a verification. If you can program that the shock is committed. Committed means that if you arrive to the end of the charge, whatever happens, you will deliver the shock. If it is non-committed, then at the end of the charge, there's going to be a last verification that you are still in arrhythmia. Okay? So at the end of the charge, there is a blanking. a blanking, a right ventricular blanking. You don't need to remember the numbers, but it's 135 milliseconds, during which he cannot detect anything. Okay, so at the end of the charge, there's a blanking, and since there is a blanking, the cycles after the blanking is never classified, and that's why you will see all the time at the end of the charge this marker at the level of the ventricle. You see, this cycle is sensed, but without indication, because since there is a blanking, the device cannot know if this cycle is fast or long, so no classifications. Okay, and then there are two cycles, 1, 2. So at the end of the charge, remember, blanking, one unclassified cycle systematically, and then the device will try to find fast cycles. Okay, and it will say, okay, I will analyze the next 3 cycles. If 2 cycles at least are fast, I will deliver on the second one. So this one is fast, it's labeled VF. The next one is also fast, it's labeled VF. So you have 2 out of 3 fast cycles, so it will deliver on the second cycles. Is this clear?
Yes. Yes.
If there are 2 slow cycles, 2 out of 3, then it will divert the charge, it will not deliver the charge. Okay?
Okay.
And there are some additional information I will give you just after. But end of the charge, blanking, unclassified, 1, 2, 2 are fast, I'll deliver on the second one. Okay? And then the shock is efficient. Clear? Okay. Now, if you have a look to the plot, here it is, it's also many markers, different markers, so a bit more difficult to understand, but this is V-sense, and so you see initially atrial sensing, ventricular pacing, atrial sensing, ventricular pacing, and then 1 or 2 PVC, and then acceleration inside the VF zone. The plot is the best way to see if there is undersensing. You see that all the cycles seems to be fast. There is a lot of variation in the cycle since it's a VF. And then you see here, some points are here, some dots here. This will correspond to the cycles that we have seen under sense. So that's the best way to see if there are many cycles. Since there are a lot of markers on the tracing, sometimes it's a bit difficult to interpret the tracing. But with the plot, you can see that these cycles are probably correctly sensed, and these here correspond to undersensing. These long cycles, okay, during a VF must correspond, and it's more or less half of the frequency of the heart rate. It's 150, and during the arrhythmia 300. So it's clearly one cycle that has been undersensed. Okay, and then at the end the shock is delivered with reduction of the arrhythmia. Are there any questions?
No.
Nope. So I will show you just briefly, but you see this is another episode of arrhythmia. So it's once more a ventricular tachycardia. You see here biventricular pacing, up, 1 PVC, and this cycle is classified VT, you see. But the next cycle is VS, PVC. So it's outside the zone. And then there's an acceleration, and then the cycles are VT. Just to show you that this one will not be integrated in the counter on an 8 out of 10, since this one is slow. So you require first 3 consecutive cycles. So there is 1, and then here you do not implement these 3 consecutive counters. So this one will not count. And then you arrive here, and then you have 1, 2, 3. So now you have the 3 consecutive, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the episode. So it's always the same name. It's very straightforward. It's always the same. It's very, once you have understood the way it works, it's very simple. So 1, 2, 3, and then you have here 8 out of 10. Okay, but first you need 3 consecutive cycles. Okay,
okay.
Good. This tracing, what do you think here?
So we still have CRT ICD.
Mm-hmm.
Spontaneous atrial signal, then right and left ventricular pacing, and then we have.
You see the tracing here, all the information that you see on the tracing? You will never see that on a Medtronic since it's filtered or on a Biotronic. But what happens? And you see also a lot of markers, okay? But you like also the quality of the tracing. So what do you think?
So I think we have the beginning of the atrial ventricular fibrillation.
Yes.
Like pretty fast.
Very fast, polymorphic, clearly life-threatening arrhythmia. This is why you have implanted the device, just to shock this kind of life-threatening arrhythmia. So what happens then on the counter? You see, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So on these cycles, you have 8 out of 10 for the VT counter, so V episode, okay? But if you wait 2 additional cycles, now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On these cycles, on this one, will start the initial duration for the VT zone, and on this one will start the initial duration for the VF zone.
Yep.
Okay, it's the same. And you see there is clearly a good sensing, and you arrive here, V-detect. So the new guidelines, once more, 5 seconds of initial duration, okay, inside the VF zone, okay, and then you will charge. You will start the charge of the capacitors, and at the end of the charge, you will deliver first blanking here. So next cycle is unclassified 1, 2, okay, and the two out of 3 are fast. Then you deliver the shock. Clear for you?
Yeah.
Good. So how long does it take from the onset of the arrhythmia to the delivery of the shock? What would you say? How many seconds?
I would say like 10, 15, 10 seconds, something like this.
Okay, so first you need to have 8 out of 10. Once more, it's not programmable. You cannot reprogram or modify this first counter. So 8 out of 10, so 8 cycles, let's consider something like 2 seconds. Okay?
Yeah.
From V episodes to V detect, how long?
It's 5 seconds then?
It's 5 seconds. That's something that you can modify. This is the one that you can modify. But all the different studies have demonstrated that there is a huge advantage to prolong this duration. So it's going to be 2 + 5, 7 seconds. Then the charge, how long?
The charge, I would say 10 seconds, something like that.
You will say that, but this is not an idea. You need to have a look exactly. Okay, charge time is 10 seconds. Okay, so you're right. So 7 seconds plus 10, 17 seconds. And at the end, then there is the confirmations, a bit less than 1 second. Okay, so from the onset of the arrhythmia to delivery of the shock, it's going to be something like 18 seconds. That's the average value if you program this with this 5 second duration. Okay,
yeah,
18 seconds. Now this is another episode, and what do you think here?
So here we have a dual chamber ICD, and we have terrible. Sorry, CRT ICD again.
CRT ICD. You see the marker. Okay, then.
And we have the beginning of ventricular tachycardia.
The onset of ventricular tachycardia. Yes, more ventricular atrium, no doubt. Okay, so what happens in terms of counter? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
We
okay.
Have 10, so we have the V episode.
So now you have the first 8 out of 10 for the VT zone. Then what does start at this time?
Then it's the duration.
It's the duration for the VT zone. And nominally, how long is the duration for? What are the guidelines for that, for the VT zone?
It's 12 seconds?
Yes, it's going to be 12 seconds. Yes, good. So you see, it's quite long. See, and after 12 seconds, you arrive to diagnosis. In Boston device, there is a discrimination. You see the main parameter is V faster than A. So it's considered as VT. and then an ATP is delivered with reduction of the arrhythmia. Okay? Yes? So how long does it take now for this one? So 8 out of 10, something like 2 seconds. And then you add the 12 seconds, it's at the end 14 seconds. Okay? You agree?
Yeah.
The delivery of the ATP is after 14 seconds. And that's a bit surprising, you see, because even if you are now programming quite long duration, you will treat with a less important delay in the VT zone than in the VF zone. That's a bit surprising. You understand that?
Yes, because of
remember in the VF zone it's something like 18 to 19 seconds. Here it's something like 14 seconds. So 5 seconds less. So you will treat much faster the VT than the VF. So I don't think it's a very good idea. And I think that's probably that you can a bit more prolong the duration inside the VT zone to avoid as much as possible treatment that are avoidable because there could be a spontaneous reduction of the arrhythmia. You understand that? Clear?
Yes, all clear.
Okay. So maybe we could program even longer. What do you think here?
So here, CRT ACD as well. Beginning of ventricular tachycardia in the so we have 3 fast cycles.
Yes, 1, 2, 3.
We have
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
8 out of 10 in the VT zone. So we have the V episode marker.
The V episode marker for which zone?
For the VT zone.
For the VT zone. Yeah. Okay. So then at this time we'll start the initial duration for the VT.
Yeah.
Okay. Then for the VF.
And then we have an acceleration of the tachycardia, and we have
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you have 8 out of 10 for the VF. So on this cycle, we'll also start the duration for the VF, okay, in parallel. You understand? Anytime the VF duration is still ongoing, you will never deliver a therapy for the VT zone. You understand that? If the VF zone is alive, means that you have verified the 8 out of 10. Even if you arrive to the end of the duration for the VT, you will not treat as a VT. You will wait until the end of the duration of the VF. You understand that?
Yes.
Yes. But now what you see here is V dur. V duration means that for any reason in this patient, the initial duration for the VT zone has been programmed quite short, from ear to ear, something like 2 seconds, okay, or 2.5 seconds. So you arrive to the end of the duration for the VT zone. But once more, so V more than A, so you could treat at this time with an ATP, but you cannot since the VF duration is still ongoing. You understand?
Yeah.
But now if you have a look to the tracing, you see one cycle is VT, 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 VT. So 5 consecutive VT here. So if there are 5 VT, you do not have anymore 6 out of 10 for the VF zone.
Yes.
Okay, that's mathematical. Okay, you understand? Okay, so at this time, on this cycle, there's no more verification of the 6 out of 10 for the VF zone. So at this time, you hear the duration for the VT zone was finished, but you could not deliver. You cannot deliver here. But at this time, then you can deliver. And then that's what will happen. You will deliver the ATP for the VT zone. You understand? Yeah. Is this clear?
Yeah, it's clear. Okay.
Okay. So you see how it works, competition between the different zones. One cycle classified VF will implement the VT counter. But if there is in parallel the VT duration and the VF duration, you will never treat as a VT when the VF duration is still ongoing. But if at one time this duration is not ongoing anymore, since you do not have anymore the 6 out of 10, then you can treat at the VT with the ATP. Okay.
How long do you program the duration for the VT zone?
You cannot program, for example, the VT duration at the same value than the VF duration. You need to program it longer for sure. Because if not, you cannot program it shorter. Because if you program the VT duration shorter than the VF duration, you will all the VF will be treated like a VT. You understand? Since all the marker of VF will also implement the VT. So you need to program a longer duration for the VT zone compared to the VF zone.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah.
Good. So this one is then treated.
But not effective.
Are there questions? It's simple, not so complicated, but we need to understand this. One other tracing here, you see once more ventricular arrhythmia. It's a beat tachycardia. There is also an arterial arrhythmia, but if you look at the cycles, this one, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you have 8 out of 10. Then start the duration for the VF zone, 5 seconds. And these 5 seconds, always at minimum 6 out of 10. So V detect, charge of the capacitors. You arrive to the end of the charge, and then the first cycle is unclassified, and then you see 1, 2, 3. And you deliver only on the third one and not on the second one. Why? You know that.
To not shock in the T wave, I guess.
Try to speak a bit louder because I don't hear you.
It's I think it's not to deliver the shock in the T wave, that it's to synchronize with the.
No, you always try to synchronize, but you could synchronize on this one. Why not on this one and on the third one? I said it's, well, that's a detail, but if you see it, you will not be surprised. But there is something I really don't understand in the Boston devices, but at the end of the charge, so there is blanking, okay? So the first cycle is never classified after the blanking, and then you will analyze the next 3. But whatever happens, you cannot deliver the shock before a delay of 500 milliseconds at the end of the charge. You see? So end of the charge, this cycle, VF, here it's 300 milliseconds. You have less than 500 milliseconds between the end of the charge and this second cycle. Since there is less than 500 milliseconds, you need to wait the next one. Okay?
Okay.
So it's that's what is called a divert window. A divert window. And what has been explained is that if you have a programmer, then this is the time where you can divert the shock. But I don't really understand how it works. But remember at least that you need at least 500 milliseconds. That's why it's not always on the second. It's in quite important number of cases on the third cycle that you will deliver. Okay? Just because you need to wait at minimum 500 milliseconds. Is this clear?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
So now this is an induction, you know?
Yeah.
At the end of the implantations, we have induced ventricular fibrillation. Charge, onset of the charge, end of the charge. You will pace the ventricle and then deliver a shock on the T wave, okay? And you see that there is induction of an arrhythmia, clearly. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the episodes. At this time, we were programming very short duration. So it's going to be 1 second, V detect after 1 second. You will charge the capacitors, and it's an, I don't know, 21 joule, if I remember. Yes, 21. So the duration of the charge is, of course, shorter if you deliver 21 joule compared to 41 joules. Okay, so quite short charge time. You arrive to the end of the charge. So once more, all the time there is a blanking. And then the next one is not classified. So what happens here?
So we wait 2 cycles. There's 2 cycles out of 3.
Yep. But you see that the 2 cycles are slow.
Yeah.
You understand? Because there is undersensing here. See, the quality of sensing is really imperfect. So these are 2 considered long cycles. So 2 out of 3 are slow. So you will divert the charge of the capacitors. You will not deliver. So you understand that there is a huge fragility. If, for example, here there is 1 VS, or here VS, or here VS, if you always have at least 6 out of 10, no impact on the charge on the capacitors. But if there is undersensing at this specific time, just you are unlucky at this time. But at the end of the charge, there is 2 consecutive cycles and even 3 with undersensing, and then you will divert the charge. So what you need to understand that there are some weakness, fragility according to the devices, and in Boston, this area is a particular area for the risk of false diversion of the charge because of undersensing. You understand?
Yeah.
So at this time, no shock is delivered. So if you divert the charge, then you need to reconfirm with now 8 out of 10. You understand? Once more. So for example, here 1, 2, 3, but then there is still undersensing here. So these 3 you cannot count on this one since there are 3 here with VS. So you will restart to 0 at this time. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Undersensing, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now you have 8 out of 10, and you are lucky because there were only 2. So it's okay. Now you have verified once more the 8 out of 10. So at this time, we'll start the duration that you can reprogram, that can modify the duration. There are 3 durations: the initial duration, the post-shock duration, not this one, and the third one, I don't remember how it is called in English. I think the duration for diversion or for reconfirmation, I don't know exactly, but I don't know the word in English, but there is a specific duration here. So now the shock has been diverted. You have re-verified 8 out of 10. So this is something that you cannot modify. In the VF zone, it's going to be 1 second. There is a duration here of 1 second that you cannot modify. So, and during this duration, you still need to have 6 out of 10. Okay. End of the duration, V-detect. And then since there has been a full charge of the capacitors, the next charge for delivering the shock is very short. So charge onset, charge end, and then verification. You see, at this time, if the shock has been diverted once, it cannot be diverted a second time, but you will still wait for the 500 milliseconds of the divert window. You understand that? So at this time, even if it is VS, the shock is committed, it will be delivered, but you will wait for the 500 seconds before delivering the shock. It's clear?
Yeah.
So if I summarize on this tracing, there is undersensing here, but you still have 6 out of 10. This patient is unlucky because it's just at the end of the charge where there is 3 consecutive cycles with undersensing, so 3, and then the shock is diverted, the charge is diverted. Then you need to re-verify the 8 out of 10. So here, undersensing. So from there, 1, 2, 3. Here you have 8 out of 10. And then there is a duration which is non-reprogrammable in the VF zone, which is 1 second. And if you have diverted once, you cannot divert it a second time for the same episode. And then the shock will be delivered. But you need to wait for the 500 milliseconds for the divert window. Okay? Questions? So what I want to show you is that according to the device, you can have a weakness, different weaknesses according to device. Here in Boston devices, this time at the end of the charge can be very problematic if there is undersensing. just 2 cycles under sense out of 3, and then you will deliver the charge. Okay. What do you think here? So you see 1 episode, shock, 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 shock. 5 shocks will be delivered. So how does it work here? Once more, you see VF, VT, VF, 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 VF. On these cycles, the initial 8 out of 10 is verified for the VT zone. On the next one, it's verified for the VF zone. So you will start here the initial duration for the VF zone. It's verified here. You will charge the capacitor, go to the end of the charge, first cycles, unclassify 1, 2. Now we have more than 500 seconds from the end of the charge and this cycle, so you can deliver on the seconds. Okay. So what do you think about the shock?
I think the shock didn't work.
Didn't work. So still in arrhythmia. So how does it work for the counter now?
It's redetection. So
there is a redetection, and how many cycles are required?
I think it's 8 out of 10.
It's going to be 8 out of 10. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So during the redetection, there is no marker here for the V episode. It's just I will need to count to know where it is verified. So it is verified on this cycle, but there is no marker. Okay. So at this time, there is a duration, the post-shock duration, which is also non-programmable in the VF zone. It's going to be 1 second. Okay. So you cannot modify it. It's going to be 1 second. 1 second. You still have 6 out of 10, and then you will start the charge of the capacitors. Okay. If you charge the capacitors now, the shock, the second shock, will be committed. It means that whatever happens, the shock will be delivered at the end of the charge. You understand? Because of the fear of the problem of the sensing, you need, of course, a redetection. You need also the duration for the redetection. But then, if you start the charge of the capacitor, you will deliver it. Okay? So you go to the end, charge this marker once more, unclassify. And it's not a question of 1, 2 here. You need to wait for 500 milliseconds. Whatever happens, you will deliver on this one. Okay? And then once more, the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you will repeat all the time. The question of the efficacy of the shock is difficult. I don't think it is efficient, at least. And then there is recurrent arrhythmia. And then, okay. How many shock can be delivered in Boston for the same episode?
8 shocks? 8
yes, 8 shock. And maximum of 8 shock. The only one which is non-committed is the first one. If you start, then the second, third, there's always a redetection phase, of course. But if you reconfirm, and then at the end of the duration, the post-shock duration of 1 second, you consider that you're still in arrhythmia. If you start the charge of the capacitor, then you will deliver the shock at the end of the charge. It's clear?
So here, I think we have the beginning of ventricular tachycardia.
Clearly, you see the dissociation, ventricular faster than the atrium. Okay. And it's classified either VF or VT. For the VT zone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. V episode. You see, it's always the same. It's very reproductive from one tracing to the other one. So here you will start the initial duration for the VT zone. It's quite long. It must be 12 seconds. Then at this time, there is the discrimination. V faster than A. So A is a VT. You deliver the ATP, and then what?
And then the ATP the ATP is not efficient, and we still have the arrhythmia, which is fast.
Yeah, if you consider before and after, it's not efficient, and it's even faster after.
The VF
it becomes to be polymorphic. So there is an acceleration of the arrhythmia. Okay?
Yep.
With the ATP.
Yep.
Degradation from a stable arrhythmia, around 200 beats per minute, to a very fast arrhythmia, more than 260 beats per minute. Okay? That's now a VF here. Clear? Acceleration. So what happens in terms of counters?
So we have 8 cycles out of 10 in the VF zone.
Yeah, exactly. So you will have the marker V detect. Okay. Then V detect. No, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here. It means that there is a redetection. You now have the 8 out of 10 for the VF. Then you start the post-therapy duration. And for the VF zone, it's 1 second. You understand what I mean? This one is non-programmable. Even if you have started with the VT, there is a readaptation. You have accelerated. So now 8 out of 10. And you do not start with the initial duration of 5 seconds, for example. Okay. The duration that will be used here is the one after the therapy. You understand? So it's going to be 1 second in the VF zone. The idea is not to prolong it too much before the charge of the capacitor if there is an acceleration. Mm-hmm. You do not consider that here it's an initial diagnosis of ventricular fibrillation. It's a post-therapy duration that is used, and it is 1 second non-programmable. So you will charge the capacitor and then at the end deliver the shock and reduce the arrhythmia. Mm-hmm. That's clear?
Yeah, all clear.
Okay. 1 or 2 tracing, and that's the end. So I will show you briefly, but try to find it. So this is an episode of arrhythmia, ventricular arrhythmia, just that you understand another parameter which is important. Here, you see this marker, sorry for the delay, but this one, V episode end. You see this one?
Yeah.
Okay. That's something you need also to understand. If you consider this arrhythmia here, okay, you see this one, this episode, there is a shock. At this time, the shock has been efficient. Okay, so there was an arrhythmia, ventricular fibrillation, and a shock. You need to understand what does it mean to define that this is the end of the episode. There is one criterion, which is once the shock is delivered, you have 10 seconds before you consider that it's the end of the episode. And it's going to be the end of the episode if during these 10 seconds, you will not encounter redetection, which means 8 out of 10 fast cycles. You understand? For example, here, the shock has been delivered here, and during 10 seconds, there is no verification of the 8 out of 10. So this is where you will have the end of the episode. You see now, you see that 1, 2, 3, 4, but you don't have at this time the 8 out of 10. So it's going to be the end of the episode. And that's not something that you can reprogram also. When you analyze the counter, you need to understand the initial duration, the 8 out of 10, the 6 out of 10, the different duration that you can reprogram, but you need to understand also what does it mean for the device, for the what define the end of the episode. And you see here that this is here, this marker. Most of the time you don't see the marker on the tracing because after the shock, you will not see the 10 additional seconds after the shock. So you don't see this marker. Here you see the marker at this time from the delivery of the shock, which defines, yes, exactly. At the end, between the end of the shock and this, there are 10 seconds. So at this time, this is now the end episode because you have not encountered the 8 out of 10. And then you will restart to 0. Now the next therapy will be the first one For example, and I will show you on the tracing that you will understand what I mean exactly. This is now another tracing. And you see that he will receive burst, ramp, and at the end, a shock. So you see the therapy is delivered. And now this is the episode end, you see? So there was a previous episode, and after 10 seconds, without 8 out of 10, this is the end of the episode. And then onset of the new arrhythmia. See, that's a clear ventricular tachycardia. So therapy will be delivered after the initial duration. So ATP, non-efficient, another ATP, non-efficient, another ATP, non-efficient, another, and another. But now it's efficient. You see, there is a reduction. So you have delivered all the burst and then the ramps, but you see that there is new onsets of a new arrhythmia. There is a new arrhythmia now, and you still haven't seen the marker V episode ends, okay? Because you don't have these 10 seconds between the last therapy and the onset of the new arrhythmia. Therefore, you see now, you now have the 8 out of 10. So what I mean is that you will deliver the last ramp that was programmed. It's not efficient, and therefore the patient will receive a shock because there was not enough time between here, the efficient ATP, and the new onset of the arrhythmia, and therefore the device will consider that this is still the same episode. It's clear for you?
Yeah.
You understand? No verification of the end of the episode, and therefore this episode should not be treated with a shock. Probably that you would like to restart with all the ATP and all before delivering the shock, but since it's the same episode, the last ramp that was programmed, and then the shock was delivered with efficient and reduction. Okay. So if I summarize, a lot of markers in Boston, good quality of the tracing, unfiltered signals at the level of the right ventricle. For the VT zone, you can program 3 zones, VT1, VT, VF. The VF cycles will implement the VT and the VT1, okay? You need to have 8 out of 10 initially, non-programmable. You cannot reprogram it. And then we'll start the initial duration. Nominally, you're supposed to program 5 seconds at least in the VF zone and at least a minimum of 12 seconds. I may recommend to program a bit more even in the VT zone, okay? During this initial duration, you need to have 6 out of 10. If you want to deliver a shock at the end of the charge of the capacitors, there is a verification for the first shock that is delivered for the episodes, if it is programmed as non-committed. If it is non-committed, there is a divert window of 500 milliseconds, and you will deliver on the second cycle 2 out of 3. If 2 out of 3 are slow, then you will divert the charge. And then there is a redetection counter. You need to verify the 8 out of 10, and then we'll start the duration for the redetection. In the VF zone, it's non-programmable, it's going to be 1 second. And if the charge has been diverted, or if the shock has been diverted, is going to be 1 second. And the parameters of the end of the episode is 10 seconds after delivery of the shock without 8 out of 10 fast cycles. Okay?
Yeah.
Any question?
No, we don't have question.
Good. So we'll see and rediscuss about Boston devices next week. Okay? Bye-bye.